file item 111, AB 1176. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1176 by Assemblymember Perea, an act relating to vehicular air pollution, declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Perea.
Mr. Speaker and members, this bill would establish the Advanced Low-Carbon Diesel Fuel Access Program designed to expand low-carbon diesel fueling infrastructure in California. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Bonta.
Question for the author.
Without objection.
Can you please clarify what amendments were recently taken on the bill and why?
Sure. The Chairman of Appropriations made me strip out all the funding in this bill.
We will take that as Mr. Perea's close. I'm sorry. Ms. Baker, you are recognized.
Thank you. I rise in support of this measure. Our good colleague from Fresno, I originally opposed this in transportation because it did not allow the focus of the program to go to communities where the greatest amount of progress could be made. And I thank the colleague for being responsive to the feedback he received in committee and for working hard to improve the bill. Appreciate that, and I also urge an aye vote.
Mr. Gomez, you are recognized.
I rise in support of 1176. This is actually a bill that will help clean the air, and especially in places like Los Angeles County. I have 5 to 7 freeways that cut through my district, so it is an important bill. And I always like to remind people it's better to have a bill that does a little something than no bill that does a whole lot of nothing. So I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 67, no 0 on the urgency. Ayes 67, no 0 on the bill. Members, I am prepared to lift the call on AB 621. Clerk will post. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 43, noes 29. That measure passes. File item 112, AB 1307. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1307 by Assemblymember McCarty and others, an act relating to public post-secondary education.
Mr. McCarty, you may open.
Last one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 1307 creates greater transparency and accountability to public colleges and universities related to proposed student fee increases. Reality is no one likes student fee increases, especially parents, students, and their families planning for their future. This bill expands upon existing law and requires our higher education segments to follow the California Student Fee, Tuition, and Transparency Act related to open public process related to student fees, or else they would not be able to receive state funding for student financial aid. This measure will ensure that families, students, and those planning for higher education receive significant notice and opportunities for engagement related to student fee hikes in California. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. McCarty. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 44, noes 24. Measure passes. Moving to file item 114. That's AB 1321. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1321 by Assemblymember Ting and others, an act relating to food and agriculture.
Mr. Ting, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 1321 expands California's opportunity to get access to over $100 million of potentially federal funding to really allow low-income communities to get access to fresh fruits and vegetables by using really farm bill money that was already appropriated by the federal government for using state dollars to leverage that money and to really make sure that that access happens at the very local community level. It's currently modeling itself after a very successful program that was really innovated by a nonprofit organization and is run in over a number of farmers markets really up and down the state. This is a unique opportunity to get federal farm bill dollars. We're already behind because the state of Washington's already got $6 million in matching grants. So by moving this bill forward, we'll get an opportunity to really make sure that California gets every dollar it's owed from the federal government for our low-income communities who can get access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Thank you. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Ting. Seeing no discussion on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 52, no 16. Measure passes. File item 115, that's AB 1326. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1326 by Assembly Member DeBobne, enacting to virtual currency.
Mr. DeBobne.
Mr. Speaker, members, today I bring before you AB 1326, a bill that establishes a licensing system for virtual currency businesses that, one, hold and store virtual currency on behalf of consumers, or two, exchange fiat currency for virtual currency. The storage and exchange of virtual currency is a growing financial industry with transaction volumes in the billions of dollars every year. This bill will give consumer confidence that they are investing their money with legitimate companies. In the last year and a half, virtual currency losses to consumers from theft and hacking has amounted to almost $500 million. The exchange and storage companies that lost these funds had no insurance or other protections to back up these losses for consumers. Today, if you lose money in an insured financial institution, you are covered by some basic protections, such as $250,000 in FDIC insurance. If you use a money transmission service, a licensed entity must have sufficient capital to cover any potential losses on the money being transferred. However, if you use virtual currency services, you do not have similar levels of protection. In California, in San Francisco alone, we have over 200 businesses that accept Bitcoin, ranging from coffee shops to restaurants. Several online merchants, including Overstock.com, Dell, Microsoft, and others, accept Bitcoin payments online. I work with both the Bitcoin industry and companies and also consumer groups to draft a balanced bill that will protect consumers, provide legitimacy to the companies, and ensure that innovation is not stifled or compromised. This bill passed the Banking Committee with a bipartisan vote, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Hadley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, regrettably, I rise in opposition to this bill. I support many of the aims of the author. We do need to bring consumer protection to certain aspects of this industry, but we should not kid ourselves. Virtual currency is not real currency. The people who are playing in virtual currencies are not expecting the same levels of consumer protection that those who make deposits into our financial institutions or who make payments under a secure payment system expect and deserve. This bill is premature. I would love to work with the author and the industry and stakeholders to continue to move this forward in the months ahead, but I don't believe this is ready. Thank you.
Seeing no further debate, Mr. Bobnet, you may close.
Well, I greatly appreciate the comments of my colleague on the Banking and Finance Committee. I would disagree that this is not real currency. Recently, the federal government seized millions of dollars of virtual currency. And if it wouldn't have been real currency, what they would have done, like when they take forfeiture goods such as counterfeit money, they would have destroyed it. They auctioned it off and sold it as a commodity. That's the federal government. Also, I don't think Overstock.com, Travelocity, or the local Starbucks in San Francisco would think this is play money because they're giving services and goods in exchange for it. And finally, I would say that our constituents and consumers within our district who use this as a new form of currency, who lost millions of dollars in different, obviously, hacking situations, Mt. Gox comes to mind, who lost their money, would not consider this fake money, but rather real currency. So with that, I ask for an aye vote.
With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 50, no 16. Measure passes. File item 116, AB 1347. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1347 by Assembly Member David Chu and others, enacting into public contracts.
Mr. David Chu, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Colleagues, AB 1347 addresses a situation that has been confronting many of California's public work contractors involving an indefinite delay of payment for extra work that was requested and performed. This bill sets up a dispute resolution process to allow both local agencies as well as contractors to come to the table when resolving claims for unpaid work. When contractors can't resolve disputes and receive prompt payment for work performed, at the request of a public agency, they can't pay their employees. The current situation puts many employers and employees in difficult financial situations. I want to thank all the stakeholders who've been engaged in conversations around this. The amendments that we took in our Appropriations Committee has removed opposition from the California State Association of Counties, CSAC, as well as from CASBO, the California Association of School Business Officials. This is a bill that's supported both by business employers and labor, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Ms. Olson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 1347. When we talk about improving the business environment in California, this is one example of what that can look like. AB 1347 creates a fair and reasonable path for California's public works contractors to get paid for extra work performed. Those working to build and maintain our roads, highways, public schools, universities, and airports should not have to wonder when or if they will get paid for the work that they performed. This bill helps provide some surety to contractors and those they employ that they will be treated fairly and paid in a timely manner. And it's a responsible approach that also protects taxpayers and the public. I'd like to thank this author for bringing this important measure forward and for working with the stakeholders to get it to a good place. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Mr. Frazier, you are recognized.
Colleagues, I rise in support of AB 1347. As a contractor, I understand just how important this legislation is. 1347 provides critical protections for our state's public works contractors, most notably small and medium-sized businesses. Allowing agencies to indefinitely drag their feet on payment for extra work performed by a contractor is at minimum unfair, and at its worst, a very serious job killer. Contractors should not have to wonder when or if they get paid for the work they've performed. And they shouldn't have to be in fear of laying off employees or having to close their doors because of late payment by a state or local agency. AB 1347 provides a very fair and reasonable path to payment for contractors while still protecting the taxpayer dollars. This is very important legislation that will help protect construction business owners and tens of thousands of trades workers who rely on. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no additional debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. It's his bill. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 72, no 0. Measure passes. File item 117, AB 1351. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1351 by Assemblymember Eggman and others, and act relating to deferred entry of judgment.
Ms. Eggman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I rise with a very important bill. AB 1351 is a bill that we've discovered the way we are currently doing things, where we make somebody who has committed a minor offense, who chooses to go into a diversion program, we're making them plead guilty first. They go through the program, their charge is dismissed, but that guilty plea stays on their record. And that is used then by the federal government, either for deportations or to prevent people from becoming citizens. This is an unintended consequence. It was a failed attempt at the war on drugs, which didn't work out when we changed it back in 1991. So this bill seeks to go back to a pretrial diversion where people can go through the program, and then they don't have to enter that guilty plea. So I would respectfully ask for your aye vote on this very important bill.
Mr. Alejo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I also rise to speak in support of this bill, AB 1351, which will make changes to the deferred entry program of judgment pretrial diversion program to limit potentially harsh and unknown immigration consequences for minor and nonviolent criminal offenses. This is also one of our Latino caucus priority bills because it aims to address discrepancies that disproportionately impact our immigrant communities. In a state where half of the children live in a household where at least one parent is an immigrant, this is vitally important to preserve our family structure. Under current law, a defendant may be advised to take a post-plea deferred entry of judgment, take part in a court-ordered drug program, and if completed, have the criminal case dismissed. Current California law even goes as far as to clear the arrest record and the conviction. But as far as the state of California is concerned, you can move on with your life after that. However, due to a misalignment with federal law, if you're from Mexico, China, England, France, or any other country, you may be torn away from your family and be deported. This was not the intent of our law, and for the sake of our families, we have a duty to fix it. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. David Chu, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, as a former criminal prosecutor, I look at all public safety proposals carefully. And as the first kid of immigrant parents born in this country, I have a strong interest in fairness for our immigrant families. And this is why I support this measure by our colleague from Stockton. It's a modest reform in terms of criminal justice, but it will have a massive impact for families that have a non-citizen immigrant parent or a family member. Under current state law, we have a clear intent to allow all residents the opportunity for diversion for low-level drug offenses. Our current statutes require that a person pleads guilty in order to qualify for diversion. Unfortunately, due to the lack of an alignment between state and federal law, when a person pleads guilty to get into a diversion program, that guilty plea triggers federal deportation. This has been true for longtime legal residents, combat veterans, parents of U.S. citizen children, all of whom are non-citizens. This is a bill to address the unintended consequences by allowing courts the discretion to provide pre-plea diversion. This is a bill that only affects drug misdemeanors, not drug dealers, not violent crime. It will be at the discretion of the judge. It's not mandatory. All other potential penalties remain on the table, including drug court, probation, and jail. And thus, colleagues, I ask all of us to consider supporting it.
Mr. Jones-Sawyer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise as many of you know, I was raised in a family of civil rights individuals, and I was raised to revere that legacy and to continue to fight for equal justice for all Americans, including hardworking immigrant families that make their home here and in my district. The Assembly member from Stockton and the sponsor of this bill identified a gross injustice, one in which one defendant can have his or her record cleared by completing court-ordered diversion and then moved on with their life, but another defendant who completed the same court-ordered diversion be locked up and deported. This is a gross injustice. It was not the intent of California law, and it must be addressed. This measure provides that a defendant's participation in pretrial diversion shall not constitute a conviction or an admission of guilt in any action or proceeding. AB 1351 makes a modest change, but one that will protect California families from being torn apart. It applies to drug misdemeanors only and is applied solely at the discretion of the court in the interest of justice. I urge all members of the Assembly to support this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Jones-Sawyer. Mr. Wagner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have to regrettably rise in opposition to this bill. The fact that there are unintended consequences as a result of federal law shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody on this floor. We have been dealing with the unintended consequences of the federal refusal to fix our immigration service across a whole host of issues. This bill, unfortunately, to my mind, is not the way to address that disconnect in this particular case. Here's why. The existing situation gets turned completely on its head under this bill. Currently, you plead guilty. That triggers your eligibility for diversion. You go into a diversion program, and after the successful completion of that program, you're allowed to have the conviction expunged. The fact that the feds aren't paying attention or don't care enough to fix the disconnect is not a reason to now change the procedure to be as follows. You don't have to plead guilty. You get into the diversion program. Hopefully you succeed in that diversion program. But if you don't, a year, two, however much time longer it's taken you to fail out of the drug diversion program, then your criminal case begins again. But we all know about how justice delayed is justice denied. We all know how extending statute of limitations makes it harder and harder for cases to be proved, either the prosecution to successfully prove their case or the defense to successfully prove their case. Either way, delay doesn't help anybody in the criminal justice system, but it is the inevitable result of those who will go through these programs, regrettably fail out of them, and then be put to the test of guilt or innocence many years later, perhaps, after witnesses' memories have faded, after witnesses have disappeared or died. That's too big a price to pay because the feds won't do their job and give us a coherent immigration system. So let's keep the pressure on the feds to fix what needs to be fixed in our immigration service, but let's not turn our criminal justice system in these circumstances, turn it upside down. I urge a no vote.
All debate having ceased, Ms. Eggman, you may close on the item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all my colleagues who spoke on this bill. And again, I would reiterate, we are just going back to a time before we started our failed war on drugs where this was the law. Studies since then have shown that there is no difference in completion rates. It doesn't make any difference. The big hammer that we've imposed versus people just wanting to be able to get some treatment. And I guess I would really disagree to think it's not our job if there are unintended consequences and over 250,000 people have been deported because of these kinds of laws around the country. This is important. This is something that we can do. This is something that's been done before. And we've also shortened the time before somebody has to be able to come back from 18 to 36 months to 6 months to a year. So to address that very issue, if there are witnesses that need to be brought back on time. So I would ask members, let's do our part. If the feds can't do theirs, we can do our part to make sure that people who are completing a program that was designed for them is able to have never then have to worry about deportation, about families being ripped apart because of our inability to be able to act. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. And with that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 44, noes 25. Measure passes. File item 118. That's AB 1354. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1354 by Assemblymember Dodd and others enacting related to discrimination.
Mr. Dodd, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I'm presenting AB 1354, the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act of 2015. This bill seeks to promote pay equity by requiring state contractors to have policies to help prevent unlawful discrimination and compiling data on wages paid to state contractors' employees by gender and race. Over the last decade, full-time working women have continued to earn an average of just 77 cents for every dollar a man makes. Income inequality shortchanges families and adds to retirement insecurity. In order to better target efforts to reduce and eliminate the wage gap, this data needs to be collected. Last year, President Obama directed the U.S. Department of Labor to gather similar data from federal contractors. To build on the same goal, AB 1354 aims to help employers take proactive measures to ensure fair pay for their employees. Closing the pay gap is about gender equality, but it's also about equal opportunity. It's about making families stronger. It's about improving our entire economy. And it's about leaving California in a better place than where we found it. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. Mr. Harper, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker and members, I am concerned that AB 1354 is loosely defined, is unclear as to what the information must be included in these new government-mandated reports. Failing to comply with these policies could subject the business to sanctions, including cancellation of the contracts or losing out on future opportunities to contract with the state of California. This bill is unnecessary as contractors are required to produce this information under current law, and this bill will add an additional layer of bureaucracy when contractors bid with the state. Colleagues, I ask for a vote against this bill.
Ms. Garcia, you are recognized.
Colleagues, I rise as a proud co-author of AB 1354. As the Vice Chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, we have made our women's economic security our foundation this year. This bill is a thoughtful policy approach to pay parity. The bill requires equal pay for equal work. Specifically, the bill seeks to compile data on gender wage inequity among state contractors and ensure state contractors have policies for preventing unlawful discrimination. The income equality program laid out in this bill will require all state contractors to prove that they are putting their monies out to their employees in a non-discriminatory manner. Requiring wage transparency ensures that employers are held accountable for maintaining pay structures in compliance with equal laws. I encourage everyone to vote aye on AB 1354. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Chavez, you are recognized.
I'm also going to stand up and support this bill. There's been a large discussion in California about equal pay for women. There's also been a large discussion about, well, let's look at the historical implications, education, times people moving out of careers. Members, I think those are arguments that don't speak to the character of how we define our state. Regardless of your gender or ethnicity or religious component, whatever the job is, you should be paid equally for that job. This report that we're requiring here, quite frankly, and I will read it. I'd like to read, permission to read?
Without objection.
Actually, what this bill says, an equal pay report that includes the total number of workers with a specific job category, so it takes care of that one element, identified by worker race, ethnicity, and gender. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not a far reach. In preparation for this, I've actually went into the federal regs and see what they're doing. It's the same thing. We, as a society, value everyone, regardless of ethnicity and gender, and to solve this report requires for somebody for 100 employees or more to report it. So this isn't impacting a small business. This is impacting people who actually have people that do contracting. This is a totally realistic bill. I'd ask all my members to support this. It's just recognizing the value of everyone who's working. Thank you.
All debate having ceased, Mr. Dodd, you may close. With that, clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 49, noes 20. Measure passes. File item 119, AB 1366. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1366 by Assemblymember Lopez and others, enacting relating to public post-secondary education.
Ms. Lopez, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud to present AB 1366. This bill created Dreamer Centers at California Community College when there are 500 or more AB 540 students enrolled in their community college and fitted to one of the CSUs. The center will assist undocumented students with the information they need, overcome the unique social administrative barriers that might be placed in front of them. AB 1366 creará centros de recursos en las universidades de California para los estudiantes indocumentados, para ayudar a los estudiantes a navegar la universidad. Más importante, los centros serán espacios seguros para los estudiantes indocumentados. En estos centros nadie les juzgará por sus estatus. AB 1366 ayudará a fortalecer el compromiso a estos estudiantes indocumentados, a las familias y finalmente ayudará a que ellos logren el sueño americano. And I respectfully ask you for a UI vote.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Mr. Bonta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm proud to rise in support of AB 1366 as a principal co-author. AB 1366 will help increase enrollment and graduation rates for California's undocumented population, especially APIs and Latinos. The 9 Dream Resource Centers currently serving California have proven successful. AB 1366 will expand the number of centers to new areas of the state where they are critically needed. I urge and I vote.
With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 46, noes 19. Measure passes. File item 120, AB 1370. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1370 by Assemblymember Medina and others, enacting relating to public post-secondary education.
Mr. Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 1370 will stop the UC from displacing California students and increase California student enrollment. This legislation would prevent the number of non-resident students enrolled at any UC campus from exceeding the 2015-2016 academic year levels. In addition, this bill will increase access to resident students by redistributing at least half of the revenues generated from non-resident enrollment to all campuses. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Medina. Ms. Gaines, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise as a joint author of AB 1370. AB 1370 will put Californians first when it comes to enrolling in the UC system by capping non-resident enrollment. Students who reside within California and pay into the system should be prioritized over students who are not residents. I ask for your support of AB 1370.
Thank you, Ms. Gaines. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 73. No, 0. Measure passes. File Item 121, AB 1396 for the purpose of amendment. Clerk will read with amendments.
Assembly Bill 1396 with amendments by Assemblymember Bonta.
Mr. Bonta, you may open on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, these amendments add an urgency clause to AB 1396. The urgency language ensures that AB 1396 becomes operative at the same time as its companion bill in the Senate, SB 591, authored by Senator Pan. This ensures that programs funded by existing tobacco taxes are backfilled for any revenue loss occurring in this fiscal year from decreased tobacco usage. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on the amendments.
Ms. Waldron, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are with objection to these amendments.
So we will do a roll call vote on these amendments. With that, the clerk will open the roll. This is for the amendments. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 43, noes 24 on the amendments. Amendments are adopted. Bills out to print and back on file.